Okay, thank you, Sean, for having me here and the invite. And good morning, evening, afternoon, night, wherever on this planet you are. For me, it's already a later afternoon. So I'm gonna talk today a bit about the harmonized standards here in Europe. Some quick introduction of myself. I worked for quite some years as a software engineer for medical devices. I developed mainly ventilators, SCM machines, stuff like that. And then more and more transitioned into quality regulatory. And I'm a member of different working groups of standardization. So I work actively in the harmonization and the standardization process. And as a member of the working group 2 of Senelec TC62, I'm also part of the team writing the set annexes and the European forward, which we are talking about today. So that's all about me. Let's start with the real agenda. So I want to talk about where is it coming from? Why do we have this kind of standards? How is the harmonization process? It's something often people mix up. And then the question is, how do we work? And then I have some examples. So in Europe, we have this new approach. Well, so new it's not anymore. It's still called the new approach, but it's already some decades old. But the idea behind that is that in the EU legislations, whether it's a directive or a regulation, it's more higher requirements, so the essential requirements, essential objectives, which are defined, but not how to implement it. The how should be in standards, in specifications, and stuff like that, so that we can somehow split off what is legal and what is technical. And the idea is furthermore that we have this kind of harmonized standards. What the process is, I will explain later, but a harmonized standard will make the presumption of conformity. So if you can show that you fulfill the standard, the conformity with the legislation is presumed. So you don't have to explain anymore to a notified body or to a agency or competent authority why you think you fulfill the requirement, but you can presume it. And the target is to get more consistent, faster conformity assessments. That's the target behind it. In the EU MDR, this use of harmonized standard is regulated in Article 8, where we exactly have what I said before, that we can use harmonized standards. And this harmonized standard can be used especially for the requirements in Annex 1, so the general safety and performance requirements, which you need to show that you comply with them. What is important, we will come later again on that, is presumption of conformity only applies there where the standard covers the relevant requirement in Annex 1. Then another question which often pops out with standards and the MDR is state of the art. What is state of the art? And state of the art in principle means the current accepted level of technical development. So what all the companies do, and a standard which is published, which is internationally accepted, is a strong indicator of state of the art. So if you want to show that you're state of the art, one quite good and strong possibility is using most current standards, which are internationally accepted. You don't need to use the standards. You can do however you want. But if you use other ways of showing state of the art, you need to justify and provide evidence. What is a harmonized standard? A harmonized standard is not a standard which is published as an EN version, what a lot of people think. This is what I wrote here in the middle. Just because it's an EN standard, it is not automatically harmonized. A harmonized standard is then when it is published in the official journal of the European Union. So this is an excerpt of the first publication of standards for the IVDR quite some years ago in 2021, when the first couple of standards have been harmonized.
Where can we find all the harmonized standards?
So they are published on the website of the European Commission.
Okay. Somebody want to find that link and put it in? Not
And
you.
if not, I will do it later when we discuss. What is important is what I have written down here. ISO, IEC standards, they are globally recognized as state of the art, but they are not harmonized automatically in the European Union. And how is the process? So how does it work until we have a harmonized standard? Catherine asks or put up her hand, please.
You want them to put up their hand if what?
No, Zoom showed that someone put up the hand to ask something, but it disappeared. So I
It was a
continue.
mistake. It was a mistake.
Okay. Yeah, okay, I see. So I continue. So if we look on the process to get a harmonized standard, the first thing is the European Commission needs to identify the need. So like the MDR, where the European Commission said, okay, we need some standards, and then they have to mandate the European standards organizations to write and provide such standards. Usually, this is CEN and CENELEC, which are the European levels of ISO and IEC. And for everything which is with radiation, so like radio equipment, it's not only ISO, IEC, CEN, CENELEC, but also ETSI. So the European Commission provides a mandate to this CEN, CENELEC, or ETSI to write such standards. Then these organizations draft these standards, which is the next point here. And often these standards are the international versions, so an ISO or IEC standard, which get the European forward and the Z annexes, and then gets published as an EN version. So often from the content side, it's nearly the same, just the forward and the Z annexes is the difference. Once the CEN-CENELEC have written or drafted this standard, they go to the HAS consultant. A HAS consultant is a harmonized standard consultant, and they are lawyers mainly, which have the mandate from the European Commission to assess the standard to see whether they really fit the needs for the mandate and provide a feedback. If needed, CEN-CENELEC will update the draft so that it fits what is needed for the MDR. And then when this process is done, a standard is published and it gets also published in the official journal of the European Union. And then when it is published in the European Union's official journal, then we have this standard as a harmonized standard. Yeah, this is what I already said before in the graphic. So what are these set annexes for? Why do we do that? In principle, it translates the standard clauses to the specific GSPRs. or whatever it is called in the other regulations. In the MDR and IVDR, it's the GSPRs. So we map which part of the standard covers which requirement in the GSPR. But not only it clarifies the coverage, but also the conditions and limitations. Sometimes it only limits to a part of the GSPR or only in regards of some specific points, but not overall. So in the end, we have somehow a traceability from a standard clause to the GSPR, which then you can use as the evidence to fulfill the GSPR. In the national forward, in the European forward, you have some dates in there. You have the adoption statement, which is quite often approved without any modification. So this confirms that it is technically identical to the IEC or ISO standard, but at least from a technical perspective, it is the same. Then you have some regulatory stuff written in there, and if needed, some national or European conditions, especially earthening or conductors and stuff like that is sometimes different. Who writes it? This is mainly Senelec. As I said, it's also ETSI for the radio equipment quite often. And within Senelec, for the medical devices, it's the working group 2 of TC62. These organizations and working groups have their own guidance documents. And one of these is the cookbook we wrote about 2 years ago within TC62 working group 2 on how to write this set annexes and the national forward or the European forward, so that it's easier for the colleagues to continue the work. What is also important is the same as for IEC and ISO standards, the national forward and the set annexes get reviewed by the national committees in all the Senelec countries. So it's not just 2 or 3 people from working group 2 which write it and then it directly goes to the HES consultant, but also all the national committees can provide their feedback.
There was a question.
Just saw it. There is one of the next slides exactly about that.
Great.
So I postponed a question to a later slide. So what does the HES consultant do? What is evaluated? So we have, as I said, this linkage. So is it really complete? Is it clear? Is the scope aligned? Is it fit? Is it technically suitable for the presumption of conformity? So is it more specific? So this is one point. It must be more specific than the law. It must have acceptance criteria. And yeah, often this linkage, normative references are feedbacks from the HES consultant coming back, or the defined terms. And give me a second, Edwin. One of these defined terms, give me a second, I just come to you. One of the defined terms, we always had this discussion is patient, because in the MDR, a patient is a human. In an IC standard, a patient is a human or animal. So we have 2 different defined terms. And so also this is something which is checked by the HES consultants. Edwin, your question.
Yeah, 14971, we had a HES consultant that would not approve what was recommended by the Senelec committee. And it got to be kind of contentious, but then his contract expired and we got it through with the other 2 HES consultants that did approve it. So it's kind of a difficult situation sometimes.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, it's always, you can ask 2 lawyers and you have at least 3 different answers. this is, in everything, if you ask two lawyers, you have three answers, and yeah, that's often an issue. But thank you for this note. Yeah, the first bullet I already said. Harmonized standards status starts with the reference in the official journal. What you need to always have an attention to the version which is listed and transition cessation information. So they say until when the standard is recognized or has its harmonized status and when it will be deleted. And you should state that in your technical documentation. And now the question which came from Pete. Some years ago, we had this Global Garden and James Elliott cases in the European Court, which in fact said, this is my technical terms and not legal terms. A lawyer would probably say different, but in principle it said, if a standard is harmonized and used for presumption, it has somewhat of a low similar characteristic. And this was somehow new for the European Union and the Commission, which then said, well, if the European Court sees this as a legal or nearly legal document, then we need to reconsider formality and scrutiny and all this stuff. So they started to reconsider all that and implement additional checks. And while doing that, the contract to Ernst & Young expired. So there was a new tender and all this process going on. So that in the end, Ernst & Young again got the contract to provide these harmonized standard consultants. And when this contract was published and Ernst & Young restarted their work, all the working groups which have been waiting on the HAS consultants, yeah, we can continue. Let's get into the racing car and restart. But yeah, the restart was quite short because the European Court made another decision. In the Malamud case, which said, well, if a document is legally a legal document, it must be publicly available. And now we have the thing that we have a document which is seen as a legal document, which must be publicly available, but which has a copyright from IEC or ISO, Sensenelec, and so on it. And the court stated, yes, this is a copyright protected document. So how do we provide public access for free to a copyright protected document? And this discussion is still ongoing. So we still have this legal uncertainty about the copyright. And this is the reason why it is, again, quite slowed down. And the main focus currently is on pure EN, so the homegrown standards, which are only EN standards and not ISO or IEC standards, which got an EN version. But there it's a little bit easier. We have a little bit less people working or discussing in this legal uncertainty. I hope, Pete, your question is answered in this regards. Bill? Is this again your hand raised, Bill? Edwin? Bill?
Yeah.
Yep.
I saw the comment on the chat too. The FDA had the same problem with ISO 1345 and ISO 9000.
Yeah.
And there's an agreement through ANSI to make them publicly available read-only. You could not print or copy the documents from the website. So that's how the US addressed it. same situation you're talking about there with the copyrights.
Yeah. So this is also, there are a lot of discussion. I mean, in Switzerland, we have a same or similar situation. Also in Switzerland, we have a lot of references in our laws to standards. So it gets quasi law and people need access. The solution we had here in Switzerland is that we have, I think it's 4 places spread over. It's quite a small country, a little bit smaller than the US. So four places are sufficient so that everyone can go within a reasonable time to this place and read the standards for free. So I think one is in Winterthur, one is Zurich, one in Geneva, and so on. And you can read the standards if you want to see it without paying. What in the end the solution will be for the European Union, we will see. It's not yet figured out, and until we have a solution for that, I expect the process keeps slowing down or more or less blocked. What can you do when we have no reference in the European Union journal? One is using the newest version of the standard to show the evidence of state of the art. Then you need to build somehow your structured argument. Why is it applicable? Where do you map it to which requirement in the GSPR checklist? Where do you see any gaps and additional controls? And you need to clearly, again, document that in your technical documentation. And somehow, I suggest the same procedure if an outdated version is harmonized. I will have an example later about that, how I often do it. There is no perfect solution, but I can show how I usually do it. What the notified bodies typically expect is this clear mapping, again, the handling of the gaps and deviations. And often you then say, okay, we fulfill this GSPR requirement by a certain clause of a standard. So you provide a test report of that standard, but don't only provide the test report of the standard, but also where the real fit is. So your risk management file, a usability document, a V&V document, whatever, not only the IEC test report, because often notified bodies don't accept only having this report. They want to see the real content of the evidence. And now I have here some examples how this could look like. On the left side, you can see this table ZZ1 in the 6601. I know this is not yet listed in the official journal. This is exactly that. So we went through the process with the HES consultant already in this with the standard. But then we had this Malamud decision and everything got somehow blocked. So we have already the set annexes in this published EN version, but it's not yet listed. But anyway, we have this list of in the table ZZ1. While one, there are two more. There is a ZZ2 for the IVDR, and no, wait, for the not the IVDR, for the machinery. Then we have another table in there. Sorry. Anyway, in this table we have the general safety performance requirement. In the first column, in the second column, we have the clause of the standard, which covers the requirement, and we have a remark. So whether it is really covered, not covered. The not covered are not always in the standard. Sometimes The not covered ones are just not listed, or conditionally covered. In this example here, for the 10.2, it is covered for cleaning, disinfection, sterilization in design and manufacturing. But packaging is not covered at all. When you then go to the corresponding part in the GSPR checklist, and this is the checklist I've taken out of the NDCG guidance. Most companies do it somehow this way. All the tables look a little bit different, but in principle, you say, is it applicable to your product, yes or no? Which standard have you used? Or a common specification, and which part, whether in full or only in part. So if you have here just these clauses, then put the clauses also in here. Then the evidence of conformance. So that's what I said before. Don't just write down the 6601-1 report, but also this example, the material list, or a drawing of some surfaces, or a packaging test report, and so on. And you have your last column where you can cover question about, is it a harmonized standard or not, or why have you used this standard? It is not harmonized yet, so I would write here that I used the latest version of a standard. So what is in the chat? Yeah, the EVS, yeah, well, okay. So I go back here to the example 2. Here in ISO 14971, this is already, this standard is already published in the official journal. So this is a harmonized standard. You do the same again. You can copy paste what is written in the table, set a 1 into the GSPR checklist. And here that set A2 is the one for the IVDR, which I mixed up before. Then what is important, what a lot of companies overlook is in the IVDR, it is written if your medical device is also machinery, you also need to consider the machinery directive. It will somewhere be replaced by machinery regulation, but still it is the machinery directive at the moment. And in the machinery directive, you have the relevant essential health and safety requirements. And the IVDR says you need to comply with them as far as they are more detailed or more specific than what is written in the Annex 1 of the IVDR. And so that you don't have to do this research, is now the IVDR more specific than the machinery directive. This was already done by Sen or Senelec in this table ZZ3. So you see in here which parts are more specific in the machinery directive and which are covered in the standard. So again, if you go then to your essential health and safety requirements checklist from the machinery directive, you see here only indents 5, 7, 9, 10, and 11 are more specific. So 1, 2, 3, 4 are not. 1, 2, 3, 4 are not. So we say no, not more specific. In the fifth one, yes, it is more specific. Yes, it applies to our device, maybe not. And then you can refer again here to the 6601-1 with corresponding clauses. So we have two questions. What makes a device a machinery? I don't have the text now in front to show you of the machinery directive. There is a quite detailed definition in the beginning, like it is in the MDR for the medical devices. But in principle, if you have something which moves or turns with power, which is not human power, but electricity or pneumatic power or whatever, then you probably are also machinery. So, for example, a ventilator to ventilate a patient which cannot breathe, which has a turbine in there to provide the air to the patient, to compress it, to provide it to the patient, is a machinery because of this turbine, which pressures up the gas to be inflated into the patient's lung, as an example. Or if you have a trolley which has a motor to move around, you're also machinery. Or an electrical bed, for example, which has a motor to move up and down the leg or the head part, is also machinery. What do we also have? Where is the ZZ3 published? So the ZZ3 is published in the A13. So what is important is you don't find it in the IEC or ISO version of the standard. This is only in the EN version. And what Sensenelec try is to get it published with the same time the international version is published. Then we don't need any amendments. If this is not feasible, like it was in the 6601-1, then the set annexes and the national forward get published in its own amendments. And this amendment then start with 11, 12, 13, so they have a 2-digit number. So another example I promised to show you is what we currently have with the 10993-17. Some years ago, the 10993-17 2023 was published in the official journal. So it was in 2024. And since then, this standard is the harmonized standard. So for this version, the 2023 version, we can presume conformity with the MDR. But now we have an amendment 1, which was published last year, 2025. Now, what do we use now? We can use state of the art, which is probably the amendment 1, 2025, but harmonized without the amendment 1. And not every notified body sees it the same way, but in fact, usually as soon as you have a newer version, the MDR always says you need to be state of the art. They expect you to go with the newest version. The most extreme I have once seen is I had a client which had an audit about, what was it? I think it was about 5, 6, maybe 7 days after a new version of an international standard was published. And this client got a major non-conformity because of being not state of the art, because not having already adopted the documentation 7 days after the publication. It's for sure a quite extreme point of view, but it existed. What I often do is I list both. I list the version which is harmonized and the one which is state of the art, so the newest version, and I show is there a gap at all? Sometimes, especially in corrections and amendments, which are quite small, it has no influence on your device. Then at least you can show in a gap assessment that you have assessed it and are working on it, or you don't have to work on it because it's not relevant for your design. So we got a lot of other chat messages. Let me quickly check. Okay, so one is already answered, I see.
Yeah, they'll still argue either way. It's a no-win when you get in a situation with the notified body that way. I'm just going to tell you. And I've tried it both ways with that, and they'll still argue either way.
Yeah.
You can have both of it, both arguments in there. It's state of the art. Either you have to have state of the art per the EU MDR, which is the newest standard, and you need to put both of them in there. In my opinion.
This is also what I made the best experience, having both in there.
Daniel may have opinion as well with his experience. And usually my experience will win out over the notified body evaluator, and I always opt to go up, but that's
Yeah.
it's
the only thing that I can say about what you just said is that sometimes it's the battle between what it was the intent of the regulation or a directive and then the opinion
correct
of somebody at the notified body, and getting these two reconciled sometimes is a problem. It requires a lot of a great ability to sort of put the technical aspect in place in a way that it's not debatable, and that's really the problem.
You have to go back to the black and white, and you have to go back to and you have to call them out on that and call up, please show me in the regulation where it states what you are telling me it has to be.
Exactly.
And you have to ask them to show it to you in the regulation. And that's how you win that battle, period. You can't, and a lot of times they can't show it to you.
If you can, if you can get them to go to the regulation with you, which is also a hesitation that I've always experienced.
Yeah. And they get angry with you, but you have to stay firm with it and say, please show it to me in the regulation where it states that.
Yeah. But
and then walk them through it and show it to
the one which asks you to use the harmonized one will show you Article 8.
Yeah.
The one which asks you to have the latest one will show you 10 times or 20 times state of the art in the regulation. So both will find their place in the regulation for their argument.
Yeah. And
it's your device, and it's your testing that you've done, and it's your state of the art. So it's your opinion. So, I mean, when the reviewers come in, you have to be able to defend your device and the state of the art for your device. So.
And it gets worse when others have yielded before to the opinion of the notified body, and now you're the outcast.
Correct.
And so now you're the rebel. Yeah.
Yeah, it gets difficult. So
what do we also have? Kritia asked, doesn't it make harmonization unneeded, especially when it is so delayed? Good question. I think it's also kind of a political question, and I'm a technician and not a politician, so yeah, I don't want to burn my fingers on that, but I can understand this question, yeah. And you mentioned that IEC standards may be for human and animals, but ISO 3485 is apparently to humans only. Yep, this is the difference between ISO and IEC. IEC defines a patient as animal or human. And interestingly, if you look into the definition of a patient in the United States, they write the patient is a human or other animals. These other animals I find is quite interesting because it means a human is also an animal. But this is another discussion. Yeah. So we have from Philip another message in the chat. The argument from notified bodies is the as far as possible reduction. So especially in the amendment we once got for the 4971 for the MDD, so the older one, which said there was a statement in there. I don't have it word by word, but you cannot use it as written in the text to reduce it as far as reasonably possible, because reasonably would include somehow the also a financial side and so on, but you need to reduce it as far as possible. And now in the current version of 4971, they wrote it differently, so they don't say anymore you cannot use as far as reasonably possible, but they point you towards the different wordings which are used in the MDR as far as reasonably possible and state of the art. So you always need to show that you are still state of the art, which can be done by using a standard. Ashley has her hand raised. Okay. I think I will continue with the next. I don't have much more slides, but some more I have. Okay, thank you, Ashley. Some common pitfalls. So as we've seen before, sometimes we have not a full coverage in the GSPR. Sometimes it's only partially covered. So this assumption, respectively ignoring, can get you some troubles or non-conformities. The limitations and the annexes and conditions in the forward I already said, and here you have exactly this what we said with the humans in the set annex of the 6601-1 in the amendment 13. It's clear written for application of this European standard under regulation. Its scope is limited to medical devices for use with human patients. This affects all clauses of this European standard. To again say here, we know we have in the definition said a patient can be a human or an animal, and here we override it by the regulation that it is only a human. So we have a hand raised. Lata.
Yeah, it's me because based on from my experience from both the side of ocean, like from notified body and manufacturer, I work from both parties. I see this is always like egg and chicken story and really pragmatic way of challenge for the manufacturer, because if we talk about any standard, the deployment will start like it takes 6 months, 1 hour based on the delta changes actually. And I think now after this many years, what I always feel is there is no consistency approach between all the notified body. Every notified body has their own approach dealing with this state of the art standard. And I think it's better to have a good dialogue with the notified body and to come with an agreement, like probably transition timeline for the new standard when it comes to state of the art, or if it is harmonized, like what would be the approach. So I think that's the only best way to for the manufacturers from the business strategy point of view.
Yeah.
So yeah, I just wanted to add that point. Yeah.
Thank you. Okay. Yeah, and also take care about the versions, which one is listed and which one is published.
Yeah, it's better to know.
So keep your conformity argument current is one thing. So check the official journal updates. And now with social media, it's much easier than it was earlier, a decade ago. As soon as a new version of the Harmonized Standards list is updated, you quite fast get a lot of LinkedIn messages which tell you that it's updated. Also check the versions of the standards and this transition dates, which are given in the harmonized standard list. When needed, trigger an impact assessment in your QMS to see what is the impact, what do we need to change, and so on. And yeah, someone needs to be owner of this task and not regulatory thinks it's the design team thinks it's quality, and quality again points to regulatory, and everyone points to the next with his fingers. I once created such a form for a client, which we used when a new version of a standard was published or an update of the official journal. So we put write down what the impact is to the product, or maybe there is no impact. And if there is impact, we had the possibility to write down what we do, when will we do it, with the due date, and we had the possibility to show that to the notified body when in the meantime he was asking or she was asking for what about the new version. So what we have in the chat. Focus, I don't know, Philip, what this was.
The DOCO-POCOS was formerly for the MDD OJEC, the date of cessation of presumption of the superseded standard. We do not see that anymore in the latest OJEC for the MDR since 2021. And this is a problem for manufacturers because they do not have any transition period when suddenly a standard harmonized pops up in the OJEC. And so many manufacturers are complaining about that. And so any insight about why the DOCO-POCOS has disappeared?
I can say. Where do you see teams getting the mental model for all most of today? So what I often see issues is with filling out these tables. Like this one here, that manufacturers just write in more or less every single line, it's 6601-1. Then the IC 6601-1 report. Sometimes even they write in here the IC version. And yeah, this is something I quite often see, that they don't really check, is it really covered or not? And if it's not covered in here, maybe for your specific device, it could be that something is for your specific device covered anyway. Then you can write it down, but you need to have some justification why you think it is covered with the 6601-1, even though it was not considered as covered in the set annexes. But just writing from the first to the last row of the GSPR 6601-1, 4971, and one or two other standards you will fulfill, then copy paste it through all pages makes no sense. So, yeah, it is interesting that the -2-83 is harmonized, and the 6601-1 not. So yes, there are, I think it's about 4 or 5 6601-2- something standard which are harmonized, but the general one is not yet. But it is as it is. Then we have another message from Hendrik. Hendrik, I don't really get your question. Can you unmute and try to say it again? So I didn't really get what you want to tell me with your question. Or Sean, do you get it?
I'm trying to understand it. I think it's really just a question of what level of MDCG rank the clinical data need to be, and it just gets into that whole question of, what is sufficient clinical evidence um, gonna look like at the end of the day? And the answer is just always, it depends on your device, it depends on the level of risk, it depends on the notified body that you're dealing with, it depends on the particular person within the notified body that you're dealing with. Um, but ultimately, as I understand it, and Carrie, you can correct me if I'm wrong, it's how convincing you make your case, and how well supported that is by the clinical evidence. Clinical evidence is the backbone of the evidence that you're providing, and you can certainly rely on the standards. You can rely on literature, you can rely on a lot of things, but when you're dealing with higher risk devices, that's probably not going to be enough.
Yeah, it's clinical evidence and state of the art. You have to, when some reviewers can be so persnickety, I don't know, can be the PIA factor, right? State of the art, it's generally what is currently what is accepted as your best practices in technology, and what is the clinical standards for the current given medical condition. And it could be what is the current gold standard in the clinic. So you need to go back to what is recognized as safe, effective in the adopted clinical practices. So the regulatory context goes back to the MDR. If we're talking medical devices, 2017-745, it references the SOTA throughout the regulation. However, it doesn't define it, right? So that's where we're all kind of sitting in this conundrum as to what is it in regards to the risk management, clinical evaluation, the benefit risk assessment. You have to go back again to the international, back to, when was it, a couple of weeks ago, Sean? The IMDRF and the MDCG, they define more clearly what the SOTA is, and develop the stage of the current technical capacity and/or the accepted clinical practice based on the relevant consolidated clinical findings in science, technology, and experience. Your reviewers don't have this. It's up to you to define it for them and explain it in your documentation. They are not, and they do not have the position or the experience to argue it, period. And if they start arguing the state of the art with you, I'm sorry, that's not their position to do that. Your clinical documentation has it. Your clinical reviewers can look at your clinical evaluation and see if it makes the defense for you. They have a panel of clinical reviewers that are above your clinical reviewers who do have that experience to do it, and it goes above that. The purpose of your clinical evaluation in the state of the art is to benchmark, to compare your device's safety and performance, and to set the content for the risk management decisions, the acceptance of the criteria of the clinical outcomes, your clinical risk analysis, and the justification of the choices in your clinical claims. What your clinical evidence is not under the MDR, it is not a clinical data for the evaluation to support the assessment as to whether or not your device achieves its, or what it does do, does it achieve the intended purpose safely and effectively? And that's all defined under the MDR Article 61 in Annex X1 5, whatever that is, and whether the evidence is sufficient and robust, and whether it's documented in your clinical evaluation report.
So there's a question about the form. If you want to write form in the chat, if you'd like a copy of the form, then Bet and I can coordinate on sending that out. Just write assessment form, something like that. In I will give him your email addresses and he can forward that to you. I just want to make sure that everybody gets that that wants it and has the opportunity to connect with him directly. Do we have any?
There's another question in the Q&A section, not in the chat, but in the Q&A section, about have you seen people list the standard without a version in the GSPR? I've never done it that way. Accordingly, I cannot say how the feedback would be from a notified body. But as far as I know the notified bodies, I don't think they will like it because, yeah, for sure in the test report it is written which version, but usually they want to see that already without opening all the documents to see which version was used. But if someone else,
the annex is part of the MDR, it has to be included. So,
yeah, I've never tried to without, but and I would not suggest to try it without.
right.
Thank you. Okay. Well, let's wrap things up. We're right at the top of the hour. I would like to give anybody that has any remaining questions an opportunity to unmute themselves and come on and ask the question of Bat. I want to thank him for his time and effort on putting this together for us. I know some of it was a little dense, at least it was for me, but I'm not an expert the way that many of you are. And I would like to say that this has been eye-opening for me personally. I don't know if anyone else feels the same. Um, I'd love to hear your feedback. Feel free to reach out to me directly with your feedback and or to contact Bat via LinkedIn or any other means. If you want to put your email in the chat, maybe people can reach out to you.
Can do that.
And yeah, I think that this was fantastic. So thank you so much for your time, everyone. Again, next week we have, let's see, two webinars, one on PMCF, and then we have uh, Michelle and Tiana from Lean RIQA talking about warning letter trends from the FDA and what the FDA is indicating that it cares about in 2026. So it's a data-driven discussion, but we're looking forward to that, and I hope that you all participate and help share the information. Thank you so much. Beat, do you want to sign off?
Well, thank you, and also thank you for all this emojis popping up on my screen and in the chat. And it was a pleasure to be here and looking forward for the next week to be here again.
Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone. Take care.
Take care. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.